This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning. We also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 9th of June 2021 and I am Miss K.
I'm Tuum.
And I am JM. In case you missed the headlines this morning, here they are. At the Daily Nation, parties in hot race for 2022 numbers. In the Standard, why it's a race against time for Uhuru. And in the Star, COVID-19 kills libido, ruins fun in bedroom. Interesting headline there.
I mean, goodness, the Star of everything that happened yesterday. That's the best thing you could put on
Yes,
the headline.
that was the best thing.
You know, I passed by my local newspaper guy today.
Yes.
He told me the Star was sold out. So it's working.
It's working.
It's working. To kick us off with what you got to tell us today.
Fantastic. Today, we will nickname former Chief Justice William Mutunga Holy Willie. And that's because his attack on President Uhuru Kenyatta was hypocritical. It was phony. And we say this because how does the good former CJ call out Uhuru for not swearing in dirty judges? And it's him who a few days ago told us judges receive bribes through their spouses. What is he telling us? That the president should confine himself to the letter of the Constitution and go ahead to appoint judges who have questionable character? I'd like to remind William Mutunga of an investigation he initiated in 2015. Excuse me. In 2015, William Mutunga ordered the JSC to investigate former Supreme Court Judge Philip Tunui for allegedly receiving a $2 million bribe at a petrol station. In fact, soon after the JSC initiated investigations, President Uhuru Kenyatta suspended Tunui and appointed a tribunal to investigate him. The tribunal, in the end, was not able to prove if the charges were true. Tunui chose to retire and the matter died. The question to Mutunga is one. If the president had the powers to suspend a Supreme Court judge then, why should he not have the power to refuse to appoint questionable judges now? Is it because you think the president's appointing role is simply ceremonial? We want to take you, Mr. Mutunga, to school and enumerate 3 constitutional theories that inform executive power. The 3 are the residual power theory, the inherent power theory, and the specific grant theory. The residual power theory takes the view that the executive authority embraces every power that is by nature neither legislative nor judicial. The residual power theory, therefore, sees power more broadly. The second theory is the inherent power theory, which argues that executive power gives the president an inherent authority to exercise any function that is inherently executive in nature, and this does not need to be limited in every action only to what is prescribed in written laws. Finally, the most restrictive theory is a specific grant theory, or the enumerated power theory, which limits the president only to what is written. Our constitutional dispensation provides for a presidential system. And this presidential system symbolizes the residual power theory, a system that places the president as head of state and head of government. That is why he can choose to assent or not to assent to the laws that parliament passes. That is why he swears in judges at State House. And not just that, how does the judiciary enforce orders? It is because it is through the police who report directly to the president. Therefore, CJ Mutunga, do not diminish presidential roles to ceremonial roles. You are punching way above your weight. The president can refuse to appoint judges, and there is nowhere you will take him.
Tuum, thank you for taking us to school. Really good grounding there on the justification for why the president continues to stall on the appointment of the 6 judges. And as Professor Mutunga said today, after the investigations are done, these 6 will either be appointed or they will be charged.
Absolutely.
Charged in a court of law for criminal offences, not even moral offences.
And
because some of them have really serious moral offences here, but criminal ones.
And I think that we should also put the blame where squarely where it lies with the JSC. As we've said in the past, the JSC is the one that recommends to the president, and they have a duty of care, some due diligence that they should do. And if those charges were known to them, why did they present to us charges that they knew were of questionable character?
Absolutely.
Exactly. Now, the judiciary think that they have thrown the BBI referendum off by stalling it in the courts. But little do they know that the game of primary thrust all along has been to combine it with the general election in August of 2022. So in fact, we encourage them to stall it further. The strategy at play here is diversion. Clamor in the east, attack in the west. First of all, it is not unusual for this to happen. Taiwan in 2004 did the same thing.
Yes.
So did Colombia in 2006. Closer to home, Zambia in 2016 held their referendum alongside the general elections. And excuse me, here are 3 reasons why the 2 elections will be combined. Number 1, and this is for the civil society types who are obsessed with saving money. You will be elated to note that we will save a great deal of money on the entire process by reducing the logistical and financial burden. The 14 billion or so shillings that was being considered for the referendum will be saved. And we will hit one bird with 2 stones. That's right, I said that right.
Yes.
Number 2, by way of strategy, in combining the election and the referendum, the president will force a consensus amongst the political elite. And here's what I mean. BBI proposes an expansion from the Ferrari presidency to the pro-box presidency. BBI guarantees positions for the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th, and the 5th runners-up in the election. So naturally, no presidential candidate will go against it. And in fact, all presidential candidates in the next election will make their alliances based on BBI. In sum, the entire political establishment, including Martha Karua, will be whipped into supporting BBI for the sake of their own political survival and political pragmatism. Number 3, finally, also by way of strategy. Through combining the election and the referendum, the president will checkmate his key opponent. Like a lamb to the slaughterhouse, Uhuru's fiercest opponent, name withheld, will be moved into a situation that is already known to be unsuitable for him, and he'll be hung out to dry. His incompetence, his duplicitous nature will be displayed, his hubris will be displayed, and he will have to play second fiddle in the opposition for a good 10 or so years post-2022. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how President Uhuru Kenyatta, in part, will have the last laugh on this matter.
I do like that idea of having the referendum and the election, especially for the civil society types who say we're hemorrhaging money.
Yes.
And I think I'll end with the Daily Nation. According to today's Daily Nation, registered party members have doubled in the last 8 years. In 2013, there were 7.6 million registered members, and the current number stands at 16.3 million. The article states that Jubilee and ODM account for the overwhelming majority of those 16.3 million registered members of political parties. But newly formed parties like UDA are fast building their support base. And how will these parties vote in 2022? The article does not tell us, but we know from history that Kenyans vote ethnically.
Yeah.
So allow me to break down what could happen in terms of ethnic coalitions come 2022. The chances of success for any presidential candidate in 2022 will depend on their ability to summon the country's major ethnic communities into coalitions, as JM has rightfully said.
Yeah.
So DP William Ruto is likely to find himself in a double bind come 2022. Why? Should he choose a Gema running mate, he risks losing the support of the other ethnic groups because of backlash against the Kikuyu Kalenjin domination of the presidency. As the president has frequently said, we cannot keep having 2 tribes in a rotational presidency. On the other hand, the DP may be set back if he selects a non-Gema running mate. This is because the Gema nation will have little incentive to vote for him without a representative in the presidency. Raila Odinga, on the other hand, can leverage on this Kikuyu Kalenjin domination of the presidency and the negative sentiments of this imbalance to marshal cross-ethnic support for his presidential bill. If he does so, the campaign could play out much like 2002, where the opposition formed one coalition to defeat Moi. It will be an anti-Kikuyu Kalenjin establishment, but this strategy will work best only if the DP chooses a Gema running mate. Either way, I think 2022 will go down as an interesting election and a unique one because we will definitely have our first runoff.
Fantastic.
Yeah, there's a very probable outcome in 2022. We have a three-part criteria that we use to judge the headlines. We ask ourselves if the headlines are topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, and thoughtful or just plain lazy. Have you got any particularly strong feelings towards these headlines?
I thought the star was thoughtful, though I don't know whether it can qualify as a winning
maybe
headline.
topical as well.
It was also topical.
I think we throw
the entire lot, yeah?
The entire lot
okay,
away.
so we have no winning headline. And now, on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So what is our final thought?
And now, final thought. It is inspired by a book entitled The Ugly Renaissance, Sex, Disease, and Excess in the Age of Beauty by Lee Alexander. Alexander Lee.
This week, our final thought is inspired by the 7 deadly sins. Yesterday, we took a look at anger, and today we're looking at greed. Greed is the excessive or insatiable desire and pursuit of material possessions, especially for excess wealth, status, power, or food. And according to the medieval theologian Thomas Aquinas, greed is a sin directly against one's neighbor, since one man cannot overabound in external riches without another man lacking them. Today's book takes a look at the hidden world behind the dazzling artwork of Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Botticelli, and other Renaissance artists. The Renaissance is renowned as a period of cultural rebirth and artistic innovation. However, because the Renaissance occurred throughout Europe and over the course of centuries, the author narrows down his scope to 3 cities in Italy, with a particular focus on Florence between the years of 1300 and 1550. The author gives us the true stories of the people and places of the Italian Renaissance. He shows us the very human sides of the great artists and their wealthy patrons. Michelangelo, for instance, who is famous for his masterpiece marble sculpture titled David, frequently got into bar fights. And the writings on the Renaissance usually speak about an era of beauty and brilliance. The name evokes images of an age of beauty, brilliance, and lofty ideals where life imitated the fantastic artwork for which the Renaissance became famous. But behind the art and culture of that time was a world of power politics, perversity, and corruption. The book tells us of tales of these materialistic politicians, amorous priests, bloody rivalries, and lives of extravagance, excess, and greed. The author analyzes the artwork of the Renaissance period as a reflection of the prevalence of carnal desires and excess. In doing so, he shows us an unromantic side of the age of beauty.
Oh. Now, did any of you know that Michelangelo was gay? Not that it matters, but oh well. I love the chapter on the workshop of the world, and not so much because Michelangelo's workshop was a holy grail of art and design, but because of how much control his father had over his career. His father was known as Lodovico. Lodovico controlled everything. What Michelangelo earned, he kept, but if his father helped him in any material sense, Lodovico could legally claim half of all the profits. Michelangelo could not enter into any contract without Lodovico's prior permission, and he could not even make a will without his father's go-ahead. Indeed, it was not until Michelangelo was 31, imagine 31, that he was formally emancipated from his father's control. The irony here, however, is that the father did not have a high opinion of Michelangelo's career. He wanted him to be a lawyer or have a career that has prestige. You see, Lodovico hailed from a family that made its money as bankers and cloth merchants. They were not as wealthy, but they had status. He claimed ancestral ties with the Medici, and through his late wife, links with the powerful Rossellai and the Del Sara families. The bottom line was Michelangelo made more than his family members. In fact, he was the family's breadwinner. In the long run, he gave his family more prestige than they ever imagined. I think this is a lesson to the overbearing parents out there. Your child doesn't have to do what you did. He or she doesn't have to be anything you want them to be. Let them choose, but give guidance. If Michelangelo became a cloth merchant or lawyer, he would never become a Renaissance titan. Lesson for you.
Absolutely.
I didn't think that was where you were going when you began, but
No,
it's a good place to end.
I just had to put it out there. For whatever reason.
So today I'll talk about the mercenaries and the art of war during the Renaissance period in the context of greed. The Renaissance period, the author tells us, was the golden age of mercenaries. From the very beginning of the period, condottieri, the Italian captains in command of mercenary companies, they dominated the political and military life of Italy.
Yeah.
And they owed their frightening preeminence to the progressive evolution of warfare from the end of the Middle Ages now towards the Renaissance period. During this period, the modes of war were changing significantly, and the most significant change was the introduction of the crossbow and the longbow. These two weapons were far superior to the typical bows and arrows of the Middle Ages. They had greater range, impact, and accuracy than anything seen before, and if properly used, they could lead to whole-scale slaughter. So these technological changes made warfare a more professional and expensive affair. The author tells us that city-states, the Italian city-states, could no longer pin their hopes on the meager capabilities of homegrown volunteer forces. If these city-states were to have any success in war, they needed to be able to employ complete units or fully equipped, well-drilled professionals, and these guys had to be prepared to use some of the newfound wealth in arming themselves as well as they could. So mercenaries, they ended up realizing, were the only solution. So from around 1300, professional mercenaries hired in large companies gradually replaced largely native troops as the main components of Italian armies. And mercenaries oftentimes were recruited from abroad. And this was actually preferred since non-natives, as they were unlikely to take sides on ideological grounds, and hence could be swayed by cash, and at the same time they allowed Italian states also access to the very latest military technology from other countries within Europe. So by the third decade of the 14th century, they had grown to be fairly sizable, we're told, well-organized units with a well-defined identity and leadership structure. Some were fairly specialized units being devoted exclusively to infantry or cavalry, but many were cohorts that addressed all military needs simultaneously. And the largest could comprise as many as 10,000 soldiers and as many as well as 20,000 camp followers. So most Italian city-states at this time employed these condottieri and their companies on the basis of short-term contracts, normally lasting between 4 and 8 months.
Wow, you know, JM, maybe that actually explains why Switzerland, the army in Switzerland, has a 9-to-5 job, and then after 5 p.m., the Italian defense, whatever they call them, takes over to protect the Swiss airspace.
Absolutely, right? Why have your own standing army where you can sometimes just outsource all that to somebody else? It might even be cheaper and easier to maintain.
And I think we've adopted that culture of mercenaries to this day. The South Africans are well known for their specialized knowledge in black ops.
Yes.
Executive outcomes.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we didn't have a winning headline today. And I'll leave you the quote. I'll end with a quote from the legendary Roy Cohn, the American lawyer and mentor to Roger Stone as well as Donald Trump. And this quote reminds me of President Uhuru Kenyatta's approach when it comes to dealing with political opponents. Roy Cohn said, "I bring out the worst in my enemies, and that's how I get them to defeat themselves."
Fantastic.
Have a good evening.